Hello everybody, greetings from Deux Plateaux in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. My name is Peter van Rooij. I am the Deputy Regional Director for the ILO based in Abidjan for our regional office that covers the whole of Africa. The ILO, as you know, is the organization as part of the United Nations family that works on decent work for all. We work with governments, employers and workers. And in the case of our office, we support 54 countries in Africa. And I am very pleased, and I want to thank colleagues of the African Development Bank for having invited us for the evaluation week together with colleagues, and I look forward to participate in this event through this keynote speech, but also hopefully through other activities. And I know other ILO colleagues will be participating in various capacities as well. So first of all, thanks to the organizers, Aminata, Olive, Marguilin, Jacqueline, Dieter and others with whom I've been in contact, because I know organizing these kind of events is a lot of work, especially a virtual event, and I'll come back to that, but also for organizing an important event, the Evaluation Week. I know it's postponed, and I am really pleased to be part of that. And I would like to also endorse the importance of this. Like the ILO, and we work closely with the African Development Bank on a number of topics. For us, evaluation and related topics, learning, training, knowledge management, and others are very important for the work we do, but I'll come back to that. So first of all, here I am virtually with you, and I've been asked to talk to you about the essence of learning by governments and development partners, development organizations in Africa, to fast-track the delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, in the light of COVID-19. That's one sentence, and it's quite a sentence. Because if you unpack the different elements of this, you would have a number of them, and quite important. And each of them I could easily speak for quite some time. So if we unpack it, we have the essence, one. We have learning, two. We have governments and development organizations, and I put them together, but they are complementing one another, and I'll come back to that as well. We have the geographical focus, Africa, of course, and that's something else that brings us together. We have fast track, the pacing of our work, very important, and I'll come back to that as well. We have the delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals, as part of the United Nations, where member states came together and had the vision of what progress we want to achieve by 2030 in an ambitious way. And then lastly, but certainly not least, is COVID-19, as if there isn't enough to talk about with the other items. And COVID-19 is an important one. Just the fact that I'm talking to you like this, just the fact that we have a virtual event is an indication of how much the world is different from 1 year ago. Who would have thought? 1 year ago, if you would have said that we would be hit by something that covers the whole globe in all the aspects of our life, where unfortunately many people would be affected, and we've had quite a number of losses across the globe, and many of us know of people who have passed away, but also how this has impacted the work of our organizations, making sure that our staff are all right, and at the same time seeing where we can somehow continue our work, adapt to the new reality, respond to the additional challenges, but also see that we can identify the opportunities. And we've seen a lot. I don't know how many of you feel that it's almost normal that we are working from home and being able to do quite a lot as compared to having worked in the office. Now, this is something that is not normal. And of course, this is a transition, so we'll see where this is going. But there will be important changes. And I'm saying this because this is a great learning imposed on us. We've learned a lot, and for sure we will be learning more. So that is the first thing when we talk about the essence of learning. COVID-19 has forced us to learn a lot. Some of the things that we are now doing are not new, but they were accelerated by COVID. So COVID-19 is something that cuts across and really impacted us in a broad manner. But let's now go to the learning more specifically. And in this regard, I want to be inspired by an article that I also wrote for the African Development Bank on the 4 questions on knowledge management. As I mentioned before, training, learning, evaluation, knowledge management, knowledge sharing, these are topics that have a lot in common. They're not the same, there are differences, but there are similarities and there are important complementarities. So in this article on the 4 questions of knowledge management, I see some linkages with the learning. Because the first question that I ask is, to what extent are we clear about the knowledge needs? Well, let me straight away put it in the context of learning. We do a lot of learning all through our lives. And this is also something that we encourage in the ILO, looking ahead to the future of work. We know the future of work is about lifelong learning. We never cease to learn. But it's not learning for the sake of learning. And this is why it is very important for our work, African Development Bank, ILO, other organizations, in support of our constituents, in the case of the ILO, governments, employers, and workers' organizations, member states, that we support them in their learning. So the first question is to have more clarity about the learning for what? What are the learning needs? And although this is easier said than done, and it sounds perhaps a bit academic, and in part it is, but it is something that deserves more attention, because better understanding the learning needs, including the why, can help us to be more focused on the learning, the what and the how. So that's the first question. The second question that derives of a better understanding of the learning needs is about what have we learned already? As organizations, we have a wealth of experience. We've learned a lot. We have monitored, we have evaluated, we have gained experiences, we have gained insight, competencies. In fact, a lot is referred to as lessons learned, which, by the way, in my view, is something that needs to be rephrased in many cases, because many of the cited lessons learned, when you scratch the surface, you see these are not necessarily new findings. So rather than lessons learned, they are perhaps mistakes repeated. Now, I'm not saying this to be grammatically correct, and I am not the one who came up with this, there's a reference to lessons to be learned rather than lessons learned. I think it's more correct because it's not only focusing on the lesson, but also the learning. So lessons to be learned, I think, is more modesty in terms of have we really learned it, or are we in the process of learning it? And importantly as well, that we focus on how are we going to learn? How do we make sure that this is a lesson that we are incorporating, that this is not a repeat that will be a mistake that will be repeated? So we're learning a lot. We have a wealth of experience and expertise, a wealth of knowledge. So that's the second question that I put out there, because if we have more clarity on the learning needs in the first place, then the next step is to see, what do we know already? What have we learned? What knowledge do we have? And that brings me to the third question, which is the gap between the learning needs and the knowledge that we have, the learning we have already done in a way, is what part of that can be filled, that gap, by others, other development organizations, other organizations such as academia, constituents themselves. So that is an important way of reducing that gap, building on the learning of others. And that then leads us to the fourth question, the gap between the real learning needs, what needs to be learned, building on what we have and what others have, then focus on the real learning, that learning that is yet to be done. So those are the four questions that I put out there on knowledge management, but as you heard, I think they are very relevant also for learning. They can help us not only to be more focused in which direction to learn, not learning for the sake of learning, but to be focused so that we can also make the best use of our resources, time included. But also to make sure that we do the necessary learning and not more, that we don't reinvent the wheel, that we can work with others, which also allows us to build partnerships and to come together in other ways. I'll come back to that. So that's my first message of 3 that I want to leave you with in this keynote speech. 4 questions on learning, essence of learning that will help us in our work as organizations to support our constituents, our member states. And that transitions me to my second point, which is about the learning needs, the learning of the constituents, the people, the organizations that we work for, if you wish, our clients. Once again, in the case of the ILO, they are governments, employers and workers organizations. In the case of our regional office, all in Africa. And this is very important, so that our learning is not an end in itself. Our learning as ILO, African Development Bank and others is a means to an end, is to enable the learning of our clients, our constituents. And there we've made a lot of progress. If I take a technical example of, for example, vocational training, something that the ILO is very active on, we have a training center in Turin in Italy, that is specialized in learning, in training, in methodologies related to that. And I can clearly see an evolution through time, whereas in the past we would focus on the training of individuals who could be vocational training specialists, who could be trainers in skills training. We've evolved from that. Doesn't mean that it doesn't take place in any case, but it has been shifted. The emphasis has shifted more towards how can we focus on the capacity of these organizations. So shifting towards training of trainers, so that these organizations, these countries have the capacity themselves to train the people needed. Because it doesn't make sense for us to train each individual. And there we have made further progress as well. Increasingly, we strengthen the capacity of the institutions, of our constituents, of our clients, if you wish. And I think that's very important. That's my second message, to focus the learning, the essence of learning, on the capacity of institutions, of the organizations that we are there to support. So how can we help them to do the learning themselves, to identify the learning, to manage the learning, the process, the prioritization, with our support. And key in this is ownership. Ownership by these organizations to identify the learning, to manage the learning, but also by ownership to take the necessary ownership, by definition, of this learning. That will have an impact in terms of the results, that will also show in sustainability of results. So ownership is very important. It's key of these institutions that we are there to support. That's part of the essence of learning. The ILO, learning for the sake of learning of the ILO, has very little value unless this learning is put in the context of supporting our constituents, the learning of these institutions. So that's my second message, that we can focus increasingly the learning on the capacity development of institutions that we're there to support, the learning capacities of these organizations. And that's where these 4 questions that I shared with you before can be very relevant. In the ILO, we're making progress on this, including a new policy on capacity development of institutions. So happy to share with you in case anybody is interested, because I think it's very important that we learn on learning together. And that relates to my third and last message that I want to leave behind through this keynote speech, which is working together as development organizations and as development organizations together to support our constituents, our members, member states. And this is where I would like to refer to 2 keywords: partnerships and scaling up. It is essential that with the needs that are out there, reinforced by COVID, some perhaps new or in a new form because of COVID, we cannot afford to have our limited resources not optimally used. It's very important that we work together. As I mentioned before in the 4 key questions, I think there are opportunities to help in the learning by building on our knowledge, our respective learnings, to help others and eventually the organizations, the member states, the constituents for whom we are there. And in this regard, I would like to give an example of how important this is. Because in a previous capacity, I was in a country where we were doing a lot on youth employment. So Development Bank. And we did a lot. In fact, so much that we took the initiative to see with the government of what was actually done the last few years there. And we found out that over a period of 5 years, there had been 250 projects on youth employment in this country. 250 projects on one topic in 5 countries. Each of them an initiative, each of them a pilot, each of them starting the learning, each of them somehow assuming that the pilot would be brought to scale if successful. And very few did. Now, that doesn't mean there was no cooperation whatsoever. There was. But there was a real lack of a vision and work together, including on the learning. So imagine 250 parallel initiatives, 250 parallel learnings. Imagine what could have been done, not only in terms of the synergies that could have been realized by all of these initiatives coming together, but also to enhance bringing it to scale through enhanced ownership by government, but also the learning, the enhanced learning that could have taken place because of these partnerships. So partnerships and scaling up are crucial for us to advance the learning, to advance the work that we do on evaluation to support our member states. So my time is almost up, almost 20 minutes. I want to leave you with these 3 messages. The 4 questions on learning based on needs, what we have, what others have, to have a focused learning. Secondly, to focus the learning on the learning of our ultimate clients, beneficiaries, constituents. In the case of the ILO, government, employers and workers. And thirdly, that we enhance our learning in partnerships with a view for scaling up of results, of sustainability, but also the learning, the scaling up the learning. So with that, I want to thank you very much. I wish you a great evaluation week. I look forward to participate and build on the results with colleagues in the ILO. Thank you very much. I think this is going to be fantastic, and I want to really wish you the best. And once again, thank you to the African Development Bank. We look forward to build on this and continue to work with you. All the best. Take care. Bye-bye.